Ladies and gentlemen, I like to use my big theater book. And with great pleasure. We're very lucky to have John Archuleta with us today. John is going to grace us with a couple of songs, and then he'll have a seat, and Simone will come out and do his thing, and these guys will do a little music throughout. So thank you again for coming.
Pastorcitos del valle llegar, y ese niño que está en esas pajas, adorar, 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 y ese niño que está en esas pajas, adorar, 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 y aunque nace chiquitito, él tan humilde por dar. Su madre es la Virgen pura, su padre es Dios celestial. Su madre es la Virgen pura, su padre es Dios celestial. You guys singing along yet? Children laughing, people passing, He is smiling, and every Lord for you. Silver bells, it's Christmas time in the city.
Thank you all for coming. My name is Simone, and this is a name that I got in a little village in Mexico. And if you'll bear with me, I'll just tell you a long story in 30 seconds. From a little boy, my impossible dream was to come to America. That's where I belonged. And it never seemed possible until I was 28 years old, and some miracle happened, and voila, I was in New York City. And my goal, I knew, was San Francisco because I have connections there. So I finally got to San Francisco, and it wasn't for me. It felt like Goldilocks. I'd not be able to find the correct bed. I'm from a sailing family, and so the winds of change blew me south to Mexico. And I ended up spending my 5 years, miraculously won visa to the United States in Mexico. So life is full of ironies like that. But this little village, Tepoztlan, I was brought back to life. I was dying with pneumonia by the time I got there. And the woman who saved me turned out to be my spiritual teacher. And she gave me the name Simone, even though I protested and said, come on, it's 1971, and everybody on the streets of Mexico was saying, Simone, like it was so cool. You know, I said, please, that's really embarrassing. My name is John. My name is John. And anyway, it's all a long story. Also, I did find my vocation by working with 250-pound Aztec Indian named Pablo, who was a clown, a shamanistic clown who wore a tutu. And we did work together. That was very, very dangerous. And I was so glad I met the lady Lucy, who I married, and we started working together and created a baby who ended up being born in Taos in 1975. And that's the end of that story. So this is Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the casa not a creature was stirring. caramba, que pasa? The niños were all tucked away in their camas, some in their calzones, some in their pajamas. They'd hung up their stockings with mucho cuidado in the hopes that old Santa would feel obligado and bring all the niños, both buenos and malos, a biggie batch of dulces and other regalos. When in the jardín arose such a grito, I sprang to my feet like a frightened cabrito. I ran to the window and looked afuera, and what in the world do you think that it era? Saint Nick in a sleigh in a big red sombrero, dashing along like a crazy bombero, and pulling his sleigh, instead of venados, were 8 little burros approaching volados. And as he drew near, this quaint little hombre was whistling and shouting and calling each nombre. Ay Pancho, ay Pepe, ay Nuca, ay Beto, ay Chocho, ay Chopo, Baruca, y Nieto. And standing erect, with his hand on his pecho, he flew to the top of our very own techo. His round belly shook like a bowl of jalea as he struggled to squeeze down our old chimenea. And huffing and puffing, at last in our sala, with soot smeared on his red suit de gala, he filled all the stockings with lovely regalos, for none of the children had been very malos. And chuckling aloud, sounding muy contento, he turned in a flash and was gone like the viento. And I heard him exclaim, and this is verdad, Merry Christmas to all y Feliz Navidad. One Christmas was so much like another in those years round the Seatown corner. Now and out of all sound, save for the distant speaking of the voices I sometimes hear moments before sleep, that I can never remember whether it snowed for 6 days and 6 nights when I was 12, or whether it snowed for 12 days and 12 nights when I was 6. All the Christmases rolled down towards the two-tongued sea, like a cold and headlong moon bundling down the sky that was our street. And they stop at the edge of the fish-freezing waves, and I push my hands into the snow and pull out whatever I can find. In goes my hand into that wool-white ball of holidays, resting on the rim of the carol-singing sea, and out come Mrs. Prothero and the firemen. It was the afternoon of the day of Christmas Eve, and I was in Mrs. Prothero's garden with her son Jim, waiting for cats. It was snowing. It was always snowing at Christmas. In my memory, December was as white as Lapland, but there were no reindeers, but there were cats. Patient, cold and callous, our hands wrapped in socks, we waited to snowball the cats. Sleek and long as jaguars and horrible whiskered, spitting and snarling, they would slink and sidle over the white-back garden walls. And the lynx-eyed hunters, Jim and I, fur-capped and moccasin trappers from Hudson Bay off Bumble's Road, would hurl our deadly snowballs at the green of their eyes. But the wise cats never appeared. We were so still, Eskimo-footed Arctic marksmen, in the muffling silence of the eternal snow, eternal that is since last Wednesday, that we never heard Mrs. Prothero's first cry from her igloo at the bottom of the garden, or if we did, it was to us as the cry of our enemy and prey, the neighbor's polar cat. But soon the cries grew louder. "Fire!" cried Mrs. Prothero as she beat on the dinner gong. We ran down the garden, arms filled with snowballs, to the house. And indeed, smoke was pouring out of the dining room, and the gong was bombulating, and Mrs. Prothero was announcing ruin like a town crier in Pompeii. This was better than all the cats in France standing on the wall in a row. We bounded into the house, laden with snowballs, and stopped outside the smoke-filled room. Something was on fire, all right. Perhaps it was Mr. Prothero, who always slept there with a newspaper over his face after his midday dinner. But he was standing in the middle of the room, saying, "A fine Christmas!" and smacking at the smoke with his slipper. "Oh, the fire brigade!" cried Mrs. Prothero as she beat the gong. "They won't be there. It's Christmas," said Mr. Prothero. There was no fire to be seen, just clouds of smoke, and Mr. Prothero standing in the middle of them, waving his slipper as though he were conducting. "Do something," he cried. And so we threw all our snowballs into the smoke. I think we missed Mr. Prothero and ran out of the house to the telephone box. Let's call the ambulance as well," Jim said. "And the police. And any Jenkins, he likes fires." But in the end, we only called the fire brigade, and soon the engine arrived, and 3 tall men in helmets got down and brought a hose into the house. Mr. Prothero got out just before they turned it on. Nobody could have had a noisier Christmas Eve. And when they had turned off the hose and were standing in the damp, smoky room, Jim's aunt, Miss Prothero, came downstairs and peered in at them. Jim and I waited to hear what she would say, because she said the right things always. Peering in at the tall fireman, standing amidst the smoke and cinders and dissolving snowballs, she said, "Would you like something to read?" Just give me a second. Years and years and years ago, when I was a boy, when there were wolves in Wales and birds the colour of red flannel petticoats whisked past the harp-shaped hills, when we sang and wallowed all night and day in caves that smelt like Sunday afternoons in damp front farmhouse parlours, when we chased with the jawbones of deacons the English and the Boers, before the motor car, before the wheel, before the Duchess-faced horse, when we rode the daft and happy hills barebacked, it snowed and it snowed. But here, the small boy says, "It snowed last year too, and I made a snowman, and my brother knocked it down, and I knocked my brother down, and then we had tea." That was not the same snow, I say. Our snow was not only shaken from whitewashed buckets down the sky, it came shoaling out of the ground. It swam and drifted out of the arms and hands and bodies of the trees. Snow grew overnight on the roofs of the houses, minutely ivied the walls, and settled on the postman opening the gate, like a dumb thunderstorm of torn white Christmas cards. Were there postmen then too? With sprinkling eyes and wind-cherried noses, on spread frozen feet, they crunched up to the doors and mittened on them manfully. But all that the children could hear was the ringing of bells. "You mean the postman went rat-a-tat-tat, but the doors rang?" "I mean that the bells that the children could hear were inside them. I only hear thunder sometimes, never bells. There were church bells too, inside them. No, no, no. In the black, snow-white steeple pulled by bishops and storks, and they rang their tidings over the bandaged town, over the powder and ice cream hills, over the crackling sea. Seemed like all the churches boomed for joy beneath my window, and all the weather vanes crew for Christmas on our fence. Get back to the postmen. They were just ordinary postmen, fond of walking and dogs and Christmas and snow. They knocked on the doors with blue knuckles. Our doors got a black knocker. They stood on the white welcome mats inside the little drifted porches, huffed and puffed, making ghosts with their breaths, and jogged from foot to foot like small boys wanting to go out. And then the presents after the Christmas box. The cold postman with the rose on his button nose tingled down the tea tray slithered run of the chilly glinting hill. He went in his ice-bound boots like a man on fishmonger slabs. He flapped his bag like a frozen camel's hump, dizzily turned the corner on one foot, and by God, he was gone. Get on to the presents. There were the useful presents, engulfing mufflers of the old coach days, mittens made for giant sloths, zebra scarves made of a silky gum-like substance that could be tug-of-war down to the galoshes, blinding tam o' shantas like patchwork tea cozies, bunny-suited busbies and balaclavas made for the victims of head-shrinking tribes, and from the aunts, who always wore wool next to the skin, mustached and rasping vests that made you wonder why the aunts had any skin left at all. And once I got a little crocheted nose bag from an aunt, alas, no longer whinnying with us. And books, pictureless books, that warned small boys not to skate on Farmer Giles's pond. They did and drowned. And books that told me everything about the wasp except why. Get on to the useless presents. Bags of moist and many-colored jelly babies, a false nose, a folded flag, a tram conductor's cap, and a machine that punched tickets and rang a bell. Never a catapult. What's by mistake no one could explain, a little hatchet. And a celluloid duck, which when you pressed it, made the most unduck-like sound, the sort of mewing moo that an ambitious cat might make who wished to be a cow. And a painting book in which I could make the grass, the trees, the sea, and the animals any color that I wished. And still, the dazzling sky blue sheep graze in the red fields beneath the rainbow-billed and pea-green birds. Hard boils, toffee, fudge, and all sorts, crunches, crackanles, humbugs, marzipan, and butter Welsh for the Welsh. Troops of bright tin soldiers who, if they could not fight, could always run, and easy hobby games for little engineers complete with instructions. Oh, easy for Leonardo. 6 Bambies, happy ladders, and a whistle to make the dog dark spot to wake up the old man next door and make him smack on the wall with his stick and shake a picture off the wall. And a packet of cigarettes. You put one in your mouth and stood at the corner of the street and waited for hours in vain for an old lady to come by and scold you for smoking a cigarette. And then, with a smirk, you ate it. And then it would be breakfast under the balloons. Were there uncles like at our house? There were always uncles at Christmas, the same uncles. And on Christmas morning, with dog-disturbing whistles and sugar fags, I would scour the swatched town for news of the little world and find always a dead bird by the post office or the white deserted swings, perhaps a robin all but one of his fires out. Men and women scooping or wading their way back from chapel with taproom noses, all albinos, huddled their stiff black jarring feathers against the irreligious snow. Mistletoe hung from the gas brackets in all the front parlors. Sherry and walnuts, bottled beer and crackers by the dessert spoons. Cats in their whereabouts watched all the fires. And the high heap fire spat, already for the chestnuts and the mulling pokers. A few large men, uncles, almost certainly, sat in the front parlor, trying, without their collars, trying out their new cigars, holding them judiciously at arm's length, returning them to their mouths, coughing, then holding them out again as though waiting for the explosion. A few small aunts, not wanted in the kitchen or anywhere else for that matter, sat at the very edges of their chairs, poised and brittle, afraid to break, like faded cups and saucers. Not many of those mornings trod the piling streets. An old man, always, fawn-bowlered, yellow-gloved, and at this time of year, with spats of snow, would take his constitutional to the white bowling green and back, as he would take it, wet or shine, every day on Doomsday or Christmas Day. Two hale young men, big pipes blazing, no overcoats, wind-swept scarves, trudged down unspeaking to the forlorn sea, to work up an appetite, to blow away the fumes, who knows, to walk into the waves till nothing was left of them but the two furling smoke clouds of their inextinguishable briars. Then I would be slapdashing home. The gravy smell of the dinners of others, the bird smell, the brandy, pudding, and mince coiling up to my nostrils. When out of a snow-clogged side lane would come a boy, the spit of myself, pink-tipped cigarette, violet past of a black eye, cocky as a bullfinch, sneering all to himself. I hated him sight unsound, and would be about to put my dog whistle to my lips and blow him off the face of Christmas, when he, with a violet wink, put his whistle to his lips and blew so high, so stridently, so incredibly loud that gobbling faces, their cheeks bulged with goose, pressed against their tinseled windows the whole length of the white, echoing street. For dinner we had turkey and blazing puddings. And after dinner, the uncles sat in front of the fire, loosened all buttons, folded their large, moist hands over their watch chains, groaned a little, and slept. Mothers, aunts, and sisters scurried to and forth, bearing tureens. Auntie Bessie, who had been frightened twice by a clockwork mouse, had to have some elderberry wine and stood by the sideboard. If the dog was sick, Auntie Dozy had to have 3 aspirins, but Auntie Hannah, who liked port, stood in the middle of the white backyard and sang like a big-bosomed thrush. I would blow up balloons to see how big they would blow up to, and when they burst, which they always did, the uncles jumped and rumbled. In the rich and heavy afternoon, the snow descending and the uncles breathing like dolphins, I would sit amongst the festoons and Chinese lanterns, nibble dates, and try to make a model man of war, following instructions, and produce what might be mistaken for a seagoing tram car. Or else I would go out, my bright new boots squeaky, into the white world, onto the seaward hill to call on Jim and Dan and Jack, and to pad through the still streets, leaving huge, deep footprints on the hidden pavement. I bet people will think there's been hippos. What would you do if you saw a hippo coming down our street? I'd go like this, bang! Throw him over the fence, roll him down the hill, tickle him behind the ear, and he would wag his tail. What would you do if you saw 2 hippos? Iron flanked and bellowing he hippos, clanked and battered through the scudding snow towards us as we passed Mr. Daniel's house. Let's post Mr. Daniel a snowball through his letterbox. Let's write things in the snow. Let's write Mr. Daniel is a spaniel all over his lawn. Or else we would walk on the white shore. Can the fishes see it snowing? The silent, one-clouded heavens drifted onto the sea. Now we were snow-blind travelers, lost on the North Hills, and huge dew-lapped dogs with flasks round their necks ambled and shambled up to us, baying, "Excelsior!" We returned home through the poor streets where just a few children fumbled with bare red fingers in the wheel-rutted snow, cat-calling after us, their voices fading as we trudged uphill into the cries of the dock birds and the hooting of the ships out in the whirling sea. At tea, the recovered uncles would be jolly. The ice cake loomed in the center of the table like a marble grave. And Auntie Hannah laced her tea with rum because it was only once a year. Bring out the tall tales now that we told by the fire as the gas lamp bubbled like a diver. Ghosts hooed like owls down the long night when I dared not look over my shoulder. Animals lurked in the cubbyhole beneath the stairs, and the gas meter ticked. I remember once we went singing carols when there was not the shaving of a moon to light the flying streets. At the end of a long road was a drive that led up to a large house. And we stumbled up the drive that night, each one of us afraid, each one holding a stone in his hand in case, all of us too brave to say a word. Wind through the trees made noises as of old, and unpleasant, and maybe web-footed men wheezing in caves. At last we reached the black bulk of the house. What should we get the Harker Herald? No, Jack said. Good King Wenceslas, I'll count to 3. 1, 2, 3, and we began to sing, our voices high and seemingly distant, in the snow-felted darkness round the house occupied by no one we knew. We huddled close together near the dark door. Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen, when the snow lay round about deep and crisp. And then a small voice, like the voice of someone who hadn't spoken in a long time, joined our singing. A small, dry, eggshell voice coming from the other side of the door. A small, dry voice coming through the keyhole. When we stopped running, we were at our house. And the front room was lovely. Balloons floated under the hot water bottle gulping gas, and all was good again and shone out over the town. Perhaps it was a ghost, Jim said. Perhaps it was trolls, Dan said, who was always reading. Let's go in and see if there's any jelly left, Jack said. And we did that. Always on Christmas night, there was music. An uncle played the violin. A cousin sang Cherry Ripe. Another cousin sang Drake's Drum. It was very warm in the little house, and Auntie Hannah, who'd got onto the parsnip wine, sang a song about bleeding hearts and death. And then another song in which she said that her heart was like a bird's nest. And everybody laughed again. And I went to bed. Looking out my bedroom window into the moonlight on the unending smoke-colored snow, I could see the lights from all the windows of the houses on our hill and hear the music from them rising up the steady falling night. I turned down the gas, got into bed, and said a few words to the close and holy darkness, and I slept. Okay.
Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, próspero año y felicidad. Wanna wish you a Merry Christmas, wanna wish you a Merry Christmas, wanna wish you a Merry Christmas from the bottom of my heart. Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, Feliz Navidad, próspero año y felicidad.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to tell a story about Bruce McIntosh, El Director. More than a decade ago, Bruce asked his troupe of players in an acting exercise to tell a story from their childhood about Christmas. And I couldn't think of a thing. And I was kind of embarrassed. I just drew a blank. I couldn't even create anything for some reason. And so the years went by, and especially this last year, I've done a lot of work writing about my past, my childhood, especially this year, and still nothing about Christmas came up, and I had no idea what that was about. And then I went, well, a month ago, I said, well, it doesn't have to be about you. So I'm going to tell you a story about, it involves me, and it involves Christmas, but it's really around my child, Hannah. So Hannah decided to be born in Banff, Alberta for some reason. So we're living in Canada. Hannah is 3 years old, and it's coming on Christmas, and she is filled with the magic of Christmas. Actually, maybe I felt it was more like greed, the stuff she was going to get, the candy and the presents or whatever that she'd gotten from TV. And I was trying to direct her into healthy thinking about the Spirit and this incredible person, Jesus, who changed the world, teaching people to love each other, even your enemies. And she would roll her eyes, and I could hear her going blah, 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 blah. And it was the weekend, there was no preschool, so we had to get out. And I said to her, why don't we go to town and ask people about Jesus? Hannah was up for any adventure. I thought we'd go do a Channel 7 on Main Street, and she was, I don't know where she was going, but we loaded into the Burley with a giant stuffed dog, Lily, and blankets, and zipped up the front of the Burley and headed off down to Main Street through the rutted snow. We were down the side street, which is completely empty, until we came to this building. The door opened, and I pulled in with the Burley. Just as this woman came out, said, oh, the service has just started. It was a church. Mm-hmm. And I know all the churches in that town were Christian, so I was going to get something about Jesus. So I was about to ask her if we could interview her, when out of my peripheral vision, I saw Hannah was out of the Burley, pell-mell down the pavement to this door at the end, and excuse me, I'm after her, and I'm one step behind when the door opens and Hannah is in through the door, and before I could say sorry, that woman says, no, come on in, and I have no idea where we are. And as I come in, but they're expecting her. Hannah sits down at the only little chair that's empty. The others, 10 maybe, filled with little people. And she's given a coloring book and colored pencils. And she immediately starts to color. And this woman starts to talk about Jesus. Talk about timing. Getting your wishes coming true. So that was a wonderful time for me. I eventually figured out, I'd never been to Sunday school, but that's what we had landed in. Hannah led the way. She knew what to do. I sharpened pencils and squashed my stuff that was going on as a lapsed Catholic, not having been to church in 50 years. I handled it very well. When the lesson was over, teacher opened the door. We were in the vestibule. Vestry is what we call it. She heads off, and all these little people follow her and stops in front of the altar. The priest blesses the children, but then the children are presented to the congregation, and then they all go like little kittens to find their parents, and Hannah comes out beaming, filled with this magic, joyous, loving energy, and I was like, well, that was cool. So we got in the valley, and we came home, but believe it or not, Hannah wanted to go there the next week, and the next week, and every Sunday from when she was 3 till she was 5, when we came back to Taos, thank God, then we were Catholics. Well, I pretended to be. No, I didn't even. I just sat in the church, in the choir loft with the other parents. Hannah went to Sunday school, and I prayed and I meditated and I practiced love and tolerance just the way Jesus would have taught. And I'm sure Jesus is quite proud of me. So that's my little story. Oh, Bruce, you won't believe this. A week ago, it's not a story about Christmas, but I had like a little flash, a little insight about my childhood and Christmas. I suspect it's to do with the fact that we had rationing. England was broke after the war. We had rationing till I was 10 years old. So this is a clip, you know, like you see in YouTube, where it's just a strip, dark on the sides, and this strip, the light is on this thing that anybody who's been to England knows about. Christmas pudding is in the middle of the table, and out of the darkness from this side comes a bottle and pours what I know now is brandy, and another hand comes out and lights the brandy, and I'm in front of this event which has the beautiful violet blue flames flickering, and the smell of the brandy and the heat, just the novelty of having heat in the middle of the table coming onto my face was very beautiful. Little jump shot, next to me, person being served the pudding found the sterling silver sixpence. That was, I'm going to say baked, but it's steamed into the pudding. They made like tamales. Who would have thought? But anyway, that's my Christmas story, as much as I've got. Thank you.
Well, next, Simone.
Well, you're going to sing for us, right? Yes.
This wasn't, no, you stop it there. Everyone's going to help us sing Silent Night in just a minute. But I found another song. I don't know how many of you know that Simone was from the Liverpool area, right? Liverpool, England. So I worked on a little Christmas song by a young chap from the area. Isn't that how you say it, that young chap?
A chap, yes.
Chap, yeah.
Fellow.
A fellow.
Yes.
Fellow chap. And so this is Christmas, and what have you done? Another day older, another just begun. And so this is Christmas, I hope you have fun. You're near and you're dear one, the old and the young. A very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Let's hope it's a good one, without any fear. And so this is Christmas, and what have we done? Another year over, and a new one's begun. A very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Let's hope it's a good one, without any fear. What is that chap's name?
I think he was another John. Another John.
Come on, there are
Another John.
There are
Anonymous John.
John's are a dime a dozen, Simone. Okay, Silent Night, everyone knows Silent Night. We're gonna just you good? Silent night, holy night, noche de amor, todo duerme el reloj, entre los lados descansan y anunciando al infinito mismo, y a la